Hi, I'm AJ Jackson. I'm an urban infill developer from Washington, D.C. With the EYA companies. I'm going to talk a little bit about Larimer and what we found there and our recommendations for that portion of the East End. Larimer's in a very strong position. It's a very walkable community, great access to transit, to retail, to employment at Bakery Square. It's seen significant public sector investment because of the Choice Neighborhoods program. For the pedestrian, Larimer really feels, and this goes back to sort of some of the boundary discussion we were having earlier, but Larimer really feels like the commercial district East Liberty really feels like the commercial district if you're walking from Larimer. So those two communities really do blend together, and it's relatively compact in size, less than half a mile. Together with East Liberty, the whole thing is really only a mile. So it's strongly poised to benefit from edge development as the transition and revitalization in East Liberty takes hold. There's also a lot of vacant land, as you know, in Larimer, which creates development opportunity. But there are some potential impediments to that revitalization taking hold. First and foremost is crime, both the reality of crime and the perception of crime. And as my colleague Aldridge talked about, sometimes the perception exceeds the reality, but nonetheless, both are issues in Larimer and really are prerequisites to the successful transition into a revitalized mixed income community there. This is addressing the crime issue. The significant number of vacant and abandoned properties, while it creates an asset in terms of, or an opportunity in terms of land to be developed, it also sends a signal of disinvestment and disinterest, and so that is a bit of a challenge to attracting private sector investment. Also, the existing composition of the neighborhood, it is, as we know, a low-income neighborhood. Virtually all of the housing today in Larimer is affordable housing. We're going to come back to this as we talk about the recommendations. So to create a mixed-income neighborhood in Larimer, the real focus is on creating additional market rate housing, both for sale and rental in that neighborhood, because again, today, virtually everything that's there, whether it's income restricted or not, is in fact affordable housing. So you need to add income to get to mixed income, which we believe is the most sustainable type of neighborhood. Another challenge out there actually is the untapped development potential in the East End, or in East Liberty, that my colleague Jerry talked about. That neighborhood is ahead of Larimer in terms of transition, and obviously there's about 1 million square feet of development opportunity that's still left to happen there. And so that just sets both a sort of a reality check on pricing and absorption as you think about what the strategies will be for Larimer going forward. So we're going to give you a series of really recommendations to try to transform Larimer into a thriving mixed income community. As I talked about, a focus on new market rate housing. Most of the new housing that's produced in Larimer going forward should be market rate, both for rent and for sale. And what I mean by that is that it should not be income restricted to incomes at 60% or below. Again, because so much of the housing in Larimer today is already affordable and so much of it is already income restricted. To make this neighborhood market rate, you need a significant injection of, or mixed income, you need a significant injection of market rate housing. And there's sort of two approaches to doing that. One is a build strategy that I'll talk about first, and that's really very similar to what ELDI has done in East Liberty, which is the acquisition of vacant and abandoned properties, the clearing of title, the demolition of homes and cleaning of sites, and then the transferring of those lots to builders for the creation of new market rate housing. As it stands today, that's really probably at a price point, we believe, based on the sort of market research we've done, of about $200,000 is where you're going to be absorbing 8 to 10, 12 houses per year, with the potential to raise prices over time as you move forward. What's important to note, though, also is that even though you're only absorbing 8 to 10 houses per year, you need to create a development opportunity, both in the new home construction and in the rehabilitation strategy, a combined market rate opportunity of at least 50 lots, so that potential home buyers perceive that there is transition going on in the neighborhood. Market rate buyers we do not believe, will come to the community to buy if they think it's one of one, if they don't think something is really going to happen there. So that's important. Scale matters is sort of a theme that we've had throughout the presentation. Secondly is a rehabilitation strategy for new market rate housing, and that involves both selling the fixable abandoned properties in Larimer, much like has been done in East Liberty. I believe they call it the flipper strategy over there, but selling those properties. We believe sort of expanding that program. There have been some very successful undertakings in other cities, particularly Washington, D.C., I'm most familiar with, of selling homes for, say, $100 to residents. This is something I know that it was tried at one time in the city of Pittsburgh, and then providing financing to allow that buyer to rehab the home with the condition that they stay in the home. The financing could be forgivable, but the city would participate in any gain if the home is ever sold. The second is to fund rehabilitation for existing owner-occupied housing in Larimer. There are still some folks in Larimer hanging on, living in their homes that they own, and a lot of those homes need work, and a lot of those folks don't have the resources to do that work. And so providing financing for existing residents of Larimer, to grants I'm talking about, to rehabilitate those homes, very similar to what Jerry talked about in East Liberty, is an important part of this strategy. Finally, allowing accessory dwelling units on single-family lots, essentially granny flats, if you will, we think is an important strategy to provide additional market rate housing in rental housing in the Larimer neighborhood and in other neighborhoods. It's also an important strategy to make home ownership more affordable for people. If you can put a granny flat over a garage or in the top level of a house and allow someone to rent that flat for $650, $750, $800 a month, that allows them essentially to afford more house to better cover their mortgage. And so it's an important form of subsidy that doesn't require direct cash from the city to do. It may require changes to zoning, either overlay or upzoning, to allow this sort of multifamily housing or multi-unit housing on single-family lots. But we think that's an important part of the strategy for adding additional market rate housing to Larimer. Finally, on the mixed income side, it's really a scattered site strategy in Larimer. I think the key sort of recommendation that we have is no more large-scale 100% income restricted or affordable, meaning income restricted and then a market rate that's really not much different, properties in Larimer. It's scattered sites of smaller affordable properties scattered throughout the neighborhood. And we have sort of a typology diagram here that maybe in Q&A we can come back and talk through of how you could scatter in a single family context, not changing the feel of the neighborhood, but spread affordable housing throughout rental housing throughout the neighborhood. Again, that may require some changes to land use policy, zoning, or overlay to allow multifamily in a single family district. But we think that's really the approach that needs to happen. It's important to note here that several of the people we interviewed brought up concerns about the maintenance and management of existing scattered site housing by the Housing Authority, and that's a critical issue that has to be addressed, again, because the perception in the community that the community is changing is key to attracting the market rate buyers. And so that is something to work through with the PHA, and we recommend in the written document that you consider private management of scattered site housing with folks who are expert in managing in mixed income communities. Finally, I want to talk about the building of the community and some of the aspects that we talked about earlier. Just as has happened in East Liberty, bringing market rate residents into Larimer to make it a mixed income community will change the community. We have to be upfront and accept that the demographic mix and the income mix of the community will change. So we have to take proactive steps to build community from the beginning, and also to address the concerns of the current residents, which are legitimate. One of the great things that we heard is that the Kingly Association is really viewed not just as a resource for Larimer, but one of the few things that seems to cross neighborhood boundaries and be a resource for the entire East End. So using that facility as an opportunity to create a regional services hub for the East End, provide information about small business opportunities, about contracting opportunities, to create a clean title triage center for existing homeowners, not just in Larimer, but throughout the East End, to come and get those titles issues cleared up. Because if you don't clear those issues, this is something that sort of go off script a little bit, if you don't clear those issues, then as those people move, that becomes future blight. I think everyone understands that. But if you leave a house and you haven't cleaned the title, so getting that done early is going to prevent sort of future problems going forward. You could think about creating an East Side hiring preference, not just a Section 3 preference or an MBE preference, but specifically a residential hiring preference to create opportunity for people in the neighborhood. And finally, the Circles program, we talked about this before, but as the neighborhood fills out, establishing a circle in Larimer and trying to engage the residents there, the Newmark area residents there, as advisors in that circles program, we think is a great way to help build community in Larimer. But it is something that has to be looked at again from the beginning.